everyone, it's me Lois with Aussie Lozzie Knit Designs, and this is Knit Bits. Today is the final video in our pattern overview series, and so we're actually going to open up a pattern and go through that together and hopefully learn some best practices. Let me switch my screen over so that you all can see what I'm looking at. All right, so this is a free pattern from the Yarnspiration website. It's called Great Curves Poncho. It's by Karen. And so this is a free pattern that you can get on the Yarnspiration's website. And we'll just take a look at this together. So if you wanted to knit this pattern, you would want to read through it first, because whenever you begin a new pattern, you should read through the whole thing at least once. And so that's one practice that you can put into place that's going to serve you well. So I would start, let me zoom in here. I would start looking at this side of the pattern over here where it begins. I mean, you can first look at the picture. They've got a great picture. This is what it should look like when you're done. And then if we come over here, we can see that we've got the yarn weight, which is a worsted 4 level, and they've got that little icon there. They've included the icon to let us know that this is a knit item and not crocheted. And then we've got the skill level or the project level, and it says intermediate. So if you are a beginner knitter, this may not be the pattern for you, but if you have been knitting for a while and you're ready to see if you're up for the next level, you could see what all is included in this and decide if it's right for you. The next portion is the abbreviations. And so these are all the abbreviations that they're going to be using in this particular pattern. And if you'll notice, they've got the SSK here, and they included instructions on how to do that, which is really helpful. So if we come around to the other side, underneath the picture, I'm just going to scroll down a bit. Here we go. We've got the material, so it's calling for the Caron Simply Soft yarn. Of course, it's a pattern by Caron, so they're calling for their own yarn. And then they've got the yards per ounce or the meters per gram, so that you know what that physically weighs, so you can try to match that if you want to. And then they've got the sizes here. One thing I love about this pattern is that they've got the sizes separated by a color coding system. So right here, they're introducing us to it, and we can see that if we're knitting the extra small to small, that we're going to be looking at red. If we're doing the large to extra large, we'll be looking at yellow. And finally, if we're doing 2X to 5XL, that all of that information will be in green. And so because they're calling for a specific yarn, which is their yarn, they're saying how many balls that you need to have. You can back that information out. Of course, if you're not using that yarn, you would just take the number of balls and look up how many yards per ball, which they tell you right here, 250, yes, and then multiply it by whatever size you're making to know how many yards approximately that you need, and then you could get a different yarn. All right, so then they tell us the knitting needle size and then the gauge. And so it says that, or size needed to update and gauge. And then another thing, it doesn't call out notions here, but note that it does say to use that you'll need 4 stitch holders. So at some point in this pattern, you're going to be putting live stitches on a stitch holder, and it won't be held by your knitting. So you want to make sure that you have something to hold those stitches with for when you get to that part of the pattern. The other thing that it says here is that you'll need stitch markers. It's always good to have those lying around for sure, right? All right, so then if we look at the other side, we're going back over to the sizes. You'll notice here that it says to fit bust measurement, and then it gives the sizes in red, yellow, and green again with different sizes for your bust. So we're going to do some interpreting of this pattern. And that's kind of what we need to do sometimes, because sometimes every single thing is not spelled out. But so if we look at this picture, sorry, I came a little off screen there. If we look at this picture, we can tell that this is an oversized sweater or poncho, which means that it has a positive ease. They're not telling us what the positive ease is, but we can safely assume from the information that they do provide that they have already accounted for that positive ease when they're giving you that it fits this particular measurement. So you can assume that if you have, say, a 46-inch bust, that you could knit the large, extra large size, and that it is actually going to have enough positive ease to cover your needs, right? And so that is very important to know because we don't want to be making this snug. That's not how it's designed. But you also don't have to worry about doing that math yourself. They've done the math for you. Just find what size bust you are and it'll fit like the picture looks. So that's really nice. And then we do have the gauge. So the gauge is given to us over a 4 or 10 by 10 inch or 10 by 10 centimeter square, and it says in stockinette stitch, which I find interesting because the bulk of this pattern is knit with this diamond panel pattern and not in stockinette stitch. But like we've talked about, I think before, it's very common to give the gauge in stockinette stitch, even if that's not the main stitch pattern, and so that's pretty common. And then the instructions begin. We just dive right in. Um, it doesn't have a called out section for notes, but do you see this part here that's all in italics? And no, you don't because this, oh yeah, you can see that. Okay. It's all in italics here. And so this is actually notes. So it's saying the instructions are written for the smallest size. If changes are necessary for a larger size, then you use within the parentheses. That's pretty standard. We know all that. And then let's see, the same color throughout the pattern, which we already figured that out at the beginning, right? And then we start right away, and they're calling out a diamond panel pattern. So these aren't cast on instructions. This is something that I would put in a section called glossary or techniques, but as you can see, there's different ways to do it. So this is another reason why you should read through the pattern first. So they're telling you what the diamond panel pattern is that you'll be needing to work. And if we just look at this really carefully, we can see that it's worked over 4 stitches and that it has 8 rows. Those are all really good things to keep in mind because when I knit this pattern, because I actually knit this one, that helped me so much because I could look at, say, 4 stitches and be like, okay, where was I in my diamond panel pattern? Come over into the notes and find my place so easily. So it's good to, even if you just keep that in the back of your mind at this point, it's good to notice those things. All right, so if we go down, we're in the instructions, so we'll scroll down some more and look at these. We see that if this has worked first the back panel and the front panel. So we're knitting individual pieces that are somehow going to be joined together. That's what this is telling us, right? Back and front, and then shaping the sides, shaping the raglans. Okay, now we're getting a clue of how this is all being joined together, right? And then the lower ribbing and the sleeves. And shaping raglans again, and finishing. So we're just doing a quick looky-loo through the instructions, but now I want us to dig a little bit deeper before we begin knitting. Because maybe I look at this pattern up here, I look at this picture, and I'm like, okay, and then I read the instructions, which says, to cast on and work the diamond panel, and then I'm like, wait a minute, because I see ribbing down here in the picture. How is that going to work out? Then I remember, well, I did see this lower ribbing section. And so it's really good for you to kind of visualize how all of this is going to be coming together while you knit. So you can read here that it says to work the first row of the diamond panel pattern, and then to work the second row of the diamond panel pattern. And then before you know it, you're already shaping the sides. So you can read that instructions here. This one in particular, I picked this pattern for a reason because I think there's a lot of little things in here that they say powerfully in one sentence. So they say, keeping continuous of the pattern, cast on 4 stitches at the beginning of the next 10 rows. Well, let's diagram that sentence. That's what we used to do back in school, right? Let's take this sentence apart. So we're going to keep working that diamond panel pattern. Remember, we just did rows 1 and 2. We're going to keep on with row 3, 4, etc. But while we're doing that, now the pattern is telling us that we need to cast on an additional 4 stitches at the beginning of each row for the next 10 rows. Okay, so that means that 10 times 4 is 40. We're adding 40 stitches over the next 10 rows. So, and actually the pattern does provide that number to you. So now you'll have this many stitches at the end of 10 rows, but it's good to keep aware of that while you're doing it. And then because they say for the next 10 rows, what they're telling you is this happens every single side. So if you're working a right side, if you're working a wrong side, it does not matter. You will be adding 4 stitches at the beginning of that row, every single row, front and or right and back side of the fabric. All right, so you'll be doing that, and then you can keep reading those, and then it will tell you how to shape the raglans. And so it's good to read that. Make sure you understand how it's all coming together. Find out how you put that lower ribbing on, and then you could read about the sleeves and all of that good stuff. And then if we want to scroll down to the bottom of the pattern, let's see here. Let me move that up a little so you guys can see. They do provide a lovely schematic. I think this is really helpful because it shows you what you're shaping. You can kind of see that in the picture, but this is really showing you, like, this is what it looks like, guys. This is what your front and back panel looks like. This is what your sleeve looks like, okay? And it doesn't show how they go together, but we know because we wear clothes that this diagonal here on the sleeve is going to attach to the diagonal here on the front and back, okay? And so the other thing they include is a little chart of that diamond panel pattern, which is really helpful. Let me scroll up so you can see that. Sorry. All right. And so we can see for sure that this is a 4-stitch repeat, it even says, and that there are 8 rows. And if you're a person like me that loves charts, or maybe you're not sure if you love charts yet, this is a really great thing to look at and kind of visualize what it is that you're making and what that will look like. So once you read through this whole pattern, we can see the picture here of the sweater and how it looks like the schematic, right? Just in actual yarn. The next thing that you should do after you read through the pattern is create your gauge swatch. So what I did for this particular pattern, and I actually think that it's really useful for any pattern, is that I noticed that the gauge was to be in stockinette stitch. But I'd never worked this diamond panel pattern before, and I also have never, I had never done the adding 4 stitches at the beginning of each row before. So there were some new things there that I wanted to kind of practice and make sure that I understood it and that it was looking right. And so I picked some items from the pattern to go ahead and practice, including the raglan shaping and all of that. I didn't do the lower ribbing, but you could do that if that's something that you wanted to check out. But I think it's a good idea to, if any part of the pattern looks like, I think I know what that's saying, but maybe not 100% sure, that you select that and see if you can do it on a smaller scale on your swatch, because practice never hurt anyone. And in fact, practicing that made me knitting this item so much smoother because I wasn't like stressed about if I did it right. I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. I knew exactly what needed to happen, and it made knitting the project so much more enjoyable. So those are some things that you can implement if you're knitting a new pattern and you're learning new things, and even if you're just knitting a pattern for the first time, it's so good to read through that whole thing. I know it can feel tedious, right? Are there people watching who you like flip to the last page? I've never done that. But like, that's a thing. People always read the last page. How's this going to end? Right? Or skimmers. I'm a skimmer. I am a total skim reader. It's really difficult for me to read all of the words. I want to skip them. And so it's really hard for those of us who are like that to just go through the pattern slowly and make sure we absorb all the information. But as we could see, in one sentence, they were packing a lot of really important information that we needed to dissect and make sure that we understand what's happening when we go to knit, okay? So read through your pattern fully at least once and practice in your gauge swatch any elements that you feel unsure of. Those are some tips for you all. So that's it for the pattern overview series. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did like this video, would you please hit like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.